Hey guys, it's Rhonda with Blessed in the Mess. Today I wanted to talk to you about triggers. And, if you're in a relationship, maybe you have a child, you know someone who's close to you in your life regularly who struggles with addiction, there are going to be triggers, and you are probably going to know what they are more than anybody else, especially if you live in the house with them. And if you're going to try to continue to stay in a relationship with someone, and you're really trying to help them, then you have to go above and beyond to try to help them avoid their triggers. So that means, you're going to have to sacrifice some stuff. My husband struggled with alcoholism. He was a chronic binge closet drinker, and you never really kind of knew what was going to set him off. But as time went on, I could kind of figure out, what his triggers were. And I would do the best that I could, to try to help him avoid those. I've never been a big drinker at all, never struggled with it. Not to say that I've never had a drink, but when he and I got together, I knew that he struggled with alcohol, so I completely gave it up. I never drank at all while we were together. I didn't think it would benefit him at all, and so I just made that sacrifice. I'm not going to bring alcohol in the house. We're not going to go to events that have alcohol. I don't have friends that drink. So alcohol, I didn't bring it into the relationship at all. And that was really not a sacrifice that much, because it wasn't a weakness or a temptation for me. But I did see certain things in his life that were triggers. And they really weren't things that I could really control. They weren't bad things. For instance, one thing, that would always trigger him, I think it triggered him every year that he was drinking during our marriage, was football. If he had been sober for a few months over the summer, the minute he started watching football, he would drink. It was a huge struggle for him to get through football season. If he went to a game, he usually, there were times when he went to games with co-workers or friends. If he went to a game, he was going to come back drinking. And because he was a closet drinker, the people he was with never saw him drink anything. They just assumed he was on drugs because they never saw him drink any alcohol. There were times that I would go with him to games, LSU games. LSU was his team, and we would go tailgate, and he'd be sober for most of the day while we were, visiting with friends and stuff, and then somehow he would manage to get a hold of alcohol, and he would be stumbling drunk on the way home, and nobody saw him drink. He wasn't sitting there socializing and drinking. Everything was done in the dark. And so I noticed early on that football was a trigger. And I did all that I could to kind of just say, let's don't go to the game. He'd go buy tickets, and tell me, we're going to the game. And, but I knew it was a trigger. I knew, it happened probably 90% of the time. I think there might have been one or two times that he didn't drink and we had the baby with us. He would drink with the baby too, but there was just one or two times, and it was probably during his sobriety, that he didn't drink. But it was a huge trigger, and I think it was just a pattern that he had. Most of his life he was always a football fan, and he probably, it's like guys who go fishing and have to drink a beer. It's just like you can't do it without it. And so when the fall would come, it would be like, oh gosh, here we go, because he's going to be drinking more. And then early on in the relationship, another trigger was when his daughters would come visit. When his daughters would come over, if he'd been sober, he's going to drink. It was like he couldn't function in that relationship without alcohol. And that was very frustrating, because you want to encourage his relationship with his daughters, but it's going to be a trigger, and you're going to start the whole cycle over again. And so neither one of those things are bad things. You know, it's not like he wants to go party with his buddies or go to a bar or, you know, maybe a wedding or something, you know, where you know they're going to have alcohol. And these are two things that should be harmless, but for some reason they were his triggers. And we have to really pay attention, because it took me a little while to figure out the pattern, you know, that these two things were triggering him. And, you know, I don't know that I could have never taken him away from his daughters. I never would have. And I never did. I always encouraged his relationship with them. I knew that they needed him. Ultimately, though, he ended up drinking and driving with one of them around Mardi Gras, and that really harmed their relationship greatly. But I could not tell him not to see his children. And ultimately, there's a TV in the house. Football is going to be on. I can't tell the man, don't watch football, you know, because he would drink at home. He would, you know, end up drunk on the sofa watching football. So for me, it wasn't that easy to help him avoid his triggers. But I could prepare myself, you know, for them after I saw the pattern, you know, that, okay, well, chances are he's going to get drunk. But if you're married to someone, you really want it to work out and you want to help them all you can, then, you know, you're going to have to make sacrifices to help them avoid their triggers. That means you may have to give up drinking if you're a drinker, and or other drugs, if you're really trying to help them, especially if their situation and their addiction, you know, is worse than yours. Then you need to be the one that doesn't bring something in that causes them to stumble, if you really want to help them. And you may have to give up stuff, you know. Holidays are really difficult for people who struggle with addiction. You know, maybe there's you know, a certain environment at that time that causes them to drink, and you know, you're just going to find ways, and you're going to find situations where you're going to have to make a sacrifice to help them, and not cause them to stumble, unfortunately. And so, you know, if you're not in a marriage, then you need to reflect on things that may cause them to stumble, and you need to make a decision if that's a sacrifice you're willing to make. You know, let's just say, for instance, you know, at your family Christmas party always causes him to drink. You know, for the last couple of years, he goes to the party and he can't control himself. Well, are you willing to give up your family at Christmas? You know, that's something you need to think about, is, you know, me changing my life drastically to help this person avoid something that's destroying them. Is it worth it? Is it really what I want to do? You know, I didn't see all of these things until after I was married, which is a lot more difficult to walk away from when you're married. Like I've said before, take your time and date. Date for a year at least, or two. Go through all the seasons of life. Go through some struggles. Go through some fights. How does this person resolve conflict with you? You know, can they sit down like an adult and talk to you and work things out, or are they going to go out and get drunk? Give yourself that. Give yourself time to get to know somebody and see what things trigger anger in them, what triggers them to isolate themselves, what would trigger them to use a substance abuse, what triggers them to go gossip. You know what I'm saying? Just like, how do people cope with things that are uncomfortable or things that trigger them? You need to see somebody for who they really are before you marry them. It's just real simple. So I hope that you're not in a mess like I was. I hate to see people in it. If there's anything that I can do to help you out, pray with you, answer questions for you. I've been getting a few questions here lately from people, and hate to see that people are struggling, but I'm glad that I'm able to relate to them, and I can kind of tell them that they're not alone. It's nice when you can tell somebody, you know what, you're not alone. You're not the only one going through this. Hang in there, you know. Knowledge is power. Reach out, ask questions, find out what it is you're dealing with. You can't fix it if you don't know what the problem is. If your car is acting funny and you want to take it in, they can't fix it if they don't know what's wrong with it. You know, same thing with your body. You know, you're sick, you're having some strange symptoms, you go into the doctor, they don't know what it is, they can't fix it, but once they figure out what it is, you got a good chance of getting treatment, getting help, getting it fixed. Do your homework, research. You're responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your sanity. You know, but if there's things that you can do to help someone not fall, not stumble, then we need to do those things if we want to stay in a relationship with them. And that is help people to avoid their triggers, if you can. So, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you listening and sharing. I hope it's helpful. In the meantime, stay blessed in your mess, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye.